Just a few days ago, a single event completely redrew the map of power in the Americas, and it all started in total, absolute darkness. This is the story of Operation Absolute Resolve.
Okay, so I want you to picture this scene. It's 2 o'clock in the morning in Caracas, Venezuela. The city's alive with that usual late-night rhythm. You know, the low hum of traffic, maybe the faint sound of a party somewhere off in the distance, and then, in the blink of an eye, absolute silence.
And I don't just mean the lights in your apartment, I mean everything stops. The streetlights go black, the backup generators in the hospitals, they sputter out and die. Cell towers go dark, the internet just vanishes. In one single chilling moment, 23 states, the entire nation, is plunged into a complete and total blackout.
Now, look, after years of a collapsing state, Venezuelans were used to blackouts. It was just a miserable fact of life. So the first thought for millions of people was probably, oh, here we go again, another failure of a broken grid. But they were so wrong.
You see, this wasn't an accident. This was a weapon. What happened in that darkness was the very first move of a meticulously planned military operation. High up above the Caribbean, U.S. Cyber Command had just pulled off a perfect digital strike. They severed the command and control systems of the Guri Dam, killing 80% of the nation's electrical power. Just like that.
And while the entire country was completely blind and deaf, the sky literally tore open. 150 American aircraft, and we're talking the best of the best. F-22 Raptors for air superiority, B-1 Lancer bombers, they came screaming into Venezuelan airspace with absolutely nothing to stop them.
By the time the sun came up over Caracas, the unthinkable had become a reality. President Nicolás Maduro was gone. And he wasn't just overthrown, he was physically taken. Extracted by a team of Delta Force operators from a secure bunker deep inside Forte Tiuna, which is the most fortified military complex in the entire country.
So what do you even call this? The world is screaming coup. The White House is calling it justice. But the reality? Well, it's far bigger and frankly far more terrifying than either of those words can capture. This wasn't just a raid. It was the violent debut of a brand new American doctrine. To understand what just happened, we have to explore the new rules of geopolitics that were literally written in the dark over Caracas.
All right, so to really get why this happened, you kind of have to unlearn about 2 centuries of American foreign policy. It starts with a concept we all learned about in history class, but believe me, it ends with something entirely new and far more aggressive.
We all remember the Monroe Doctrine, right? From 1823? For 200 years, it was the bedrock of U.S. policy right in its own backyard. The message was simple, it was direct. European powers, you stay on your side of the Atlantic. The Americas are our sphere of influence. But that's the old playbook.
Now, analysts are calling what just happened the Donroe Doctrine. This new policy, which was solidified in the 2025 National Security Strategy, completely changed the game. It stopped looking at Latin America through that old lens of promoting democracy and started seeing it through the cold, hard lens of national survival. So under this new way of thinking, Venezuela wasn't just some corrupted dictatorship anymore. The Pentagon officially reclassified it. It was now considered an active forward operating base for America's global rivals. I mean, think about it. They had Russian military advisors on the ground, Iranian naval vessels were being serviced in Venezuelan ports, and the whole country was so deeply in debt to China that its foreign policy was basically being run from Beijing.
And this quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of the Donroe Doctrine. The message is brutally clear. If you are a nation in the Western Hemisphere and you let America's rivals, Russia, China, Iran, set up shop in your country, you forfeit your sovereignty, period. So the key takeaway here is that Operation Absolute Resolve wasn't sold as a liberation of the Venezuelan people. No, it was framed as a strategic sanitization of the neighborhood.
Which, of course, raises the big question, why now? I mean, the Maduro regime has been a thorn in Washington's side for years. They tried sanctions, diplomatic pressure, these maximum pressure campaigns. They tried all of it, and none of it worked. In fact, most of those policies just ended up making the Venezuelan people poorer, while the regime's elite got even richer on the black market.
Well, the simple answer is that Washington finally decided its old strategy had hit a brick wall. Sanctions had reached a point of diminishing returns. It was like trying to treat a deadly disease with a medicine that was just making the patient weaker, not actually killing the illness. So they decided to put down the medicine and pick up a hammer. But look, a strategic shift alone isn't a blank check for war. You need a trigger. And in this case, there were 2 very specific events that really forced the United States' hand. One was about having the legal justification, and the other, well, The other was about cold, hard energy security. Okay, so the first trigger was a legal one, and it gave the U.S. the perfect cover. Let's rewind to July 28, 2024. Venezuela holds a presidential election. The opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez wins, and it wasn't even close, right? Every single independent exit poll confirmed it was a landslide. But Maduro's electoral council, they just lied. They declared Maduro the winner without a shred of evidence. So when he inaugurated himself for a third term in early 2025, he effectively made himself an illegitimate ruler. That allowed the U.S. to frame their action not as an invasion of a sovereign nation, but as simply enforcing the results of a democratic election.
But that legal cover? It was just that. Cover. The real spark, the thing that truly lit the fuse, was all about energy. Specifically, a place called the Essequibo region. It's this huge chunk of land that makes up about 2/3 of the neighboring country of Guyana.
So between 2023 and 2025, ExxonMobil discovered a just massive amount of high-quality crude oil right off the coast of Essequibo. And this discovery transformed Guyana overnight into a place of immense strategic importance for U.S. energy security. And guess what? Venezuela wanted it. They revived this old territorial claim, created a new state on paper called Guyana Essequiba, and started moving their military units to the border. By late 2025, U.S. intelligence was practically screaming that a limited Venezuelan invasion to snatch those oil fields was about to happen. And that was the red line. A hostile Russian-backed Venezuela controlling key global oil reserves. Yeah, that was just not going to be allowed to happen.
So all the pieces are now in place, right? You've got the new doctrine, the legal justification, and a red line drawn over oil. The military plan is ready to go. But before a single missile flew, there was one final, secret diplomatic push to try and prevent the war. And it all came down to a single phone call. We now know that back in November 2025, a direct phone call happened between President Trump and Nicolás Maduro. This was the ultimate carrot and stick moment. The carrot was actually pretty generous. The U.S. offered Maduro, his wife Cilia Flores, and his whole inner circle safe passage out of the country to a friendly place like Turkey or Russia. The deal was even sweetened a bit. Some of their frozen personal assets would be unfrozen, enough to fund a life of extreme luxury. But there was one totally non-negotiable condition. He had to leave immediately and hand power over to a transitional council.
Maduro said no. He came back with a counteroffer that was an immediate deal killer. First, he demanded total global amnesty, not just from the U.S., but full immunity from prosecution for crimes against humanity, anywhere in the world. But the real poison pill, the thing that broke the whole deal, was the military. Maduro demanded that the entire Venezuelan military command structure had to stay in the hands of his loyalist, Chavista generals.
The U.S. saw this for exactly what it was, a puppet transition. Sure, Maduro would be gone, but his corrupt and brutal system, the one holding all the real power, would stay right in place. The American side immediately rejected it. And when that phone call ended, the last chance for a peaceful resolution, the entire diplomatic track, died right along with it. The military operation was given the final green light.
Which brings us right back to that Saturday morning, January 3rd, 2 a.m. hours. The plan that was put into motion wasn't some conventional invasion, it was a decapitation strike. The main goal wasn't to fight the Venezuelan army, it was to cut the head off the snake before the body even knew it was under attack.
The operation unfolded in 3 perfectly synchronized phases. First, the cyber attack, to sow chaos and confusion. Second, a massive air campaign to blind and deafen the entire military command structure. And third, the surgical special forces raid to go in and get the target.
So let's break down those first 2 phases. The cyber attack on the Guri Dam systems instantly cut communications. The Venezuelan high command couldn't give orders. The pro-government armed gangs, the colectivos, they couldn't organize. As this digital paralysis was setting in, the air campaign hit in waves. In the port city of La Guaira, they sank the Navy while it was still at anchor and just obliterated the coastal air defenses. In Miranda State, they wiped out the radar installations, blinding the military. And in Caracas, they pounded the Fuerte Tiuna military base, creating total chaos right at the heart of the regime's power.
And while all of this was going on, Phase 3 kicked off. Helicopters from the elite 160th SOAR, the Night Stalkers, flew a Delta Force team right into the capital. And here's the crucial piece of intelligence that made it all work. They had a spy. A CIA asset inside the palace guard had given them the exact real-time location of Maduro's secure bunker. The firefight was reportedly very brief. Maduro and his wife were secured, put on helicopters, and flown directly to the USS Iwo Jima, which was waiting just offshore. It was surgical, it was brutal, and it completely shattered the myth that the regime was invincible.
Okay, so the military operation itself was a stunning tactical success, but this is where the story takes a really sharp and unexpected turn. Pretty much everyone assumed the U.S. would just hand the keys to the country over to the democratically elected opposition. Yeah, that is not what happened.
Instead, President Trump announced that for the foreseeable future, the United States is going to run Venezuela directly. He established an interim administration, which is already being called the Group, and it's being led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. So, in effect, Venezuela has just become a U.S. protectorate.
And this has created an absolute mess, a massive constitutional crisis. You've got three different groups all claiming to be the legitimate government. You have Delcy Rodriguez, Maduro's vice president, who says she's the constitutional successor and is calling this an illegal kidnapping. Then you have Edmundo Gonzalez, who rightfully says he's the legitimate president based on the 2024 election results. And then you have the U.S. interim administration sitting on top of it all as the de facto occupying power, basically saying we're in charge until we decide things are fixed.
And fixing Venezuela, that is going to be an astronomical task. The immediate goal is to get the oil flowing again, which means U.S. companies are going to have to rebuild the ruined state oil company, PDVSA. But after decades of corruption and total neglect, the infrastructure is completely gutted. The estimated price tag just to get it back on its feet is a staggering $110 billion.
And even if you could somehow find that money, the timeline is just as daunting. Experts are estimating it will take at least a decade to rebuild. And that's a best-case scenario. That doesn't even account for the biggest problem, security. I mean, who's going to invest billions of dollars into a country if a violent guerrilla insurgency could break out tomorrow?
So, how do we sum all this up? Well, Operation Absolute Resolve was, without a doubt, a tactical masterpiece. It achieved its main military objective with absolutely stunning speed and precision, but in doing so, it may have also created a strategic nightmare. The U.S. got what it wanted. The dictator is gone, and its rivals have been kicked out of its backyard. But it has set a very dangerous global precedent. The message sent to the rest of the world is this: if we don't like your leader, and if you threaten what we see as our security interests, we will come and take you. Concepts like sovereign immunity and the UN Charter have effectively been made obsolete. The Donroe Doctrine is now the de facto law of the land in the Western Hemisphere.
So here's the bottom line. America now owns a broken nation of 30 million people. As of today, the long, simmering Cold War in Venezuela is over. But the hot war of occupation, of rebuilding, and of facing the consequences of this decision, well, that has just begun. And the question we're all left with is, what happens next?